Hi boys and girls, today I'm going to show you how to draw fractions on a number line. If you don't already have a piece of paper and a pencil, please stop the video and go grab some. It's really important that you draw these with me so that you can get a good idea on how to break apart your pieces. If you have paper already, let's get started. The first thing I want you to do today is I want you to think about how we draw fraction strips. So you might remember our fraction strips that we drew were big, long rectangles. They look kind of like this. That's a fraction strip. And if I want to take this and cut it into a fraction, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it in half because I want to make halves today. So I'm going to look where about halfway point is and I'm going to draw a line down. I've separated it into two equal parts. So I'm going to label each equal part as 1/2. We know that each part is 1/2 because unit fraction is the fraction of each piece. So what I'm going to do is I've got my whole fraction bar. I'm going to also make this in a number bond to kind of show you what that looks like. I've got my whole, and then I'm going to have two parts because each piece is worth 1/2. So I have 2/2 equal 1 whole. I'm going to now show you how to turn this into a number line. So here's what we do. We're going to take a line and we're going to put it underneath our fraction strip just like this. And see how I have my end here? I'm going to actually bring the line right down onto my number line so that it lines up. It's the same exact length as my fraction strip. On the top, I'm going to label this as 0 holes and 1 hole. Let me make it a little bit better so it stands out. And sometimes I like to actually put a little box around it too so it stands out. I have a 0 and a 1. Now some people like to label on the bottom of the number line. Some people like to label on the top. It doesn't really matter how you do it. I like to keep my holes on the top because down below is where I'm going to label all of my parts. So now I have the space between 0 and 1. This is one whole piece. And we already cut it in half. So I'm going to line it up with my same halfway mark. And I'm going to draw my line down just like that. And the way we label this is we say 0/2, 1/2, 2/2. So we basically are just counting up on our number line. And you might say, well, Mrs. Steffen, why did you put 1/2 and 1/2 here and you didn't write 1/2, 1/2, 1/2? Well, here's the difference. This 1/2 is labeling the space between two of these tick marks. These are labeling what you would do if you were to count up by fractions. So if you were to count these fractions, you would say 1/2, 2/2. It's basically the same answer. Now, here's something that's really important that I want you to remember when you are working with fractions on a number line. You're always going to draw one less line than you need the number of spaces. So for example, if you need to have two parts, you need to draw one line. So if I'm going to draw a number line and I need to have 4 parts, for example, I'm going to draw 3 lines because 3 lines is going to cut into 4 parts. So always remember you draw one less line than you need your number of parts. So now let's try it then. If we're going to do the next one is thirds, think about what do you know about thirds? If I need 3 pieces for thirds, how many lines am I going to draw in the middle? Well, if I need 3, I'm going to draw, that's right, 2 lines. So I like to do this. I like to put like a little dot instead of making my full lines until I'm really sure about the size. I just make sure that they're the same. Like one might not be over far enough and I want to move them a little bit. And then I go ahead and make my 2 lines to make my 3 parts. I label each piece as 1/3 because it's my unit fraction. If I were to turn this into a number bond, I would have 1 whole, and then I would have 3 parts because it's cut into thirds. Now, when I want to turn it into a number line, I draw my line underneath. Make sure you bring down your beginning and end points. We don't count those as the lines when we cut our pieces because that's the beginning and the end. It's like having the beginning and the end of your fraction strip. You put your 0 holes, you put your 1 hole, and now let's bring down our lines. We need to cut 2 lines to make 3 spaces. We start with 0, thirds, because we're counting up by thirds, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. So that's how you label thirds. Now I want you to think about what would you do if you were to make fourths. Well, you would do the same exact thing. You would draw your fraction strip. You would think, oh, fourths, I know I can cut them in half first, and then I can cut them in half again to make equal fourths. I would label each piece 1/4. Up here I would say, oh yeah, one whole has 4 parts. I would label my unit fraction, which is the value of each piece, 1/4. And then for my number line, I would bring it all down. Make sure you're lining it up so it's even. There's my 0 wholes. There's my 1 whole. And then I'm going to bring down each of these lines onto my number line. And I'm going to count up by fourths. 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So that's how you do it.